Liz Truss's election was very much expected, but there's not going to be much time to celebrate, is there?
No, there really isn't. She's now leader of the Conservative Party, but it's not until tomorrow that she becomes Prime Minister, and then after that it will be a whirlwind. She might have a little bit of time on that travel back from Balmoral, where she goes to see the Queen to formally be made Prime Minister. But as soon as she is back in Downing Street, sometime UK time, about 4 o'clock, she will be in and out of meetings, constantly being briefed by civil servants. She will be making appointments to her cabinet. She'll be getting phone calls from those world leaders who are currently congratulating her, and she will be wanting to make announcements. And she's also got Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday. Normally when someone takes over after a general election, Parliament isn't yet sitting because it takes time to get everyone installed. So you've got a bit of time before your first parliamentary appearances. She's got no time at all. So it will really come down to how much preparation she's been able to do throughout this leadership campaign.
It was a pretty ferocious contest there between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, but the one thing that they agreed on was for more financial support for Britons due to all the cost of living pressures. Liz Truss says that she would reveal a plan in a week's time or so. Is there any indication what that will actually involve?
Not entirely. We've had a few hints in some of the newspapers today. There's two aspects to it. One is obviously talking about direct support going to households. It's unclear what amount that will be, but it looks like something is coming. And there was some briefing that was saying this is going to be on a scale of the kind of support that people had during the COVID crisis. So that is a huge amount of money that the government would be committing. The second is dealing with the issue more fundamentally. It's about whether or not you can get a price cap on energy prices, because it might not just be this winter. That will take legislation. Plans will have been put in place, but it will still take time to get through. And then there is more generally sort of fixing the underlying problems. We've already seen the outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson talking about nuclear power, but a lot of this is obviously worldwide. So it will also be about what she's doing around the world, because it's not just about how it affects the UK.
Now, Ms Truss says that she's also going to unveil an emergency budget soon, which will include $50 billion worth of tax cuts. She argues that the UK's tax burden has been behind its sluggish growth recently. Is she right?
I'm not an economist, I'm not going to pronounce on it entirely, but the fact that a lot of people are calling it into question, including Rishi Sunak, is a sort of big clue that it's a risk, what she's planning on doing. Again, we don't know the difference between the things that she was talking about during the campaign, which was to get elected, and then when she starts to see briefings and goes through the detail with civil servants, whether she changes slightly the direction. But she has put a lot of emphasis on tax cuts. Obviously, her critics, including in the Labour Party as well as within her own party, will be sort of talking about inflation and talking about the direction of travel for the economy more generally. So if she brings in tax cuts and it is believed that that has made the situation worse, she's going to find herself in a very tricky position politically. And I think a lot of her party, it really comes down to the next 6 months, because there will be a lot of them that will be putting huge amount of pressure on her if they think that she has made the wrong calls at this really, really difficult time.
The NHS has also been under significant strain the last few years, especially with the pandemic. Talk us through Liz Truss's strategy here, particularly her plan to reverse the rise in national insurance. Is that likely to make a difference?
Yeah, that's not going to make a difference to the NHS. So the money that they're talking about, these rises in national insurance, a particular part of our taxes on people in jobs, that was supposed to go particularly to social care, to trying to deal with things that were putting pressure on the NHS and is a huge problem for society. In fact, a lot of that money was already earmarked to be diverted to the NHS. Taking that away and reversing that rise in national insurance means that that pot of money isn't there. Again, she can try and find it from other sources, but she, again, has not wanted to put up taxes. So she's not looking at corporation tax rise. She's not looking at other sort of sources of that. So a lot of it comes down to borrowing. And again, it goes back to the economic handling. Can she improve the tax receipts? Can we get the economy going to such a stage where there is more money to put in the NHS? But that's not going to help in the short term. In the short term, this winter, the NHS is looking like it's going to be under huge pressure. We're already seeing problems in terms of ambulances, a lot of talk about our GP services. I think it's going to be a really tricky winter for doctors and nurses.
Let's return to power prices. You brought that up a little while ago. Truss wants to remove so-called green levies to try and bring them down, but the government is also committed to net zero emissions by 2050. So how is she able to do both here?
I'm not sure that she will be able to do both, and there is a good chance that actually we see some of those promises reversed. You know, there's been lots of talk amongst the parts of the Conservative Party about frustration with some of the imposition that our commitment to net zero, which was brought in by her predecessor but one, Theresa May, what that means for other things that you can do in the current climate. Obviously, though, it's a big concern for many people in the country. You know, we've just been through a summer which for the UK was an incredible heat wave, drought problems in parts of the country. We're approaching a winter. We have had many where we've seen big floods. You know, huge problems in terms of our infrastructure of dealing with that. So, you know, the issues of climate change are starting to feel very real for people. And at a time when we're dealing with, you know, an energy crisis and talking about energy instability, people are really thinking about sort of long-term infrastructure and so forth. So, again, you know, it's difficult to know how she balances the sort of short-term needs versus these long-term but really important parts of our policy, of our sort of policy infrastructure. But it's also, we don't really know what impact that's going to have on the electorate, what they're going to think about the choices that she makes. Again, it's quite high-stakes stuff that we're talking about.
What about a freeze on power prices? We've been hearing a lot about that lately, and there was some reports earlier today that if she did become Prime Minister, this would most likely be one of her policies. How much of an impact is that likely to have?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that we do see that. It's certainly one of the options that civil servants will have been working up. You know, it has the potential to make a big difference for a lot of families. It doesn't address all the wider issues around cost of living, you know, the impact that inflation is having on their ability to make money go further. But it will help in some respects. But there's different issue. The price cap only applies to, you know, domestic families and their energy costs. Businesses, you know, public services themselves, they are all affected by the price rise. So the policy has to go further than just that, you know, it can have knock-on effects elsewhere in the country. So it's just one of a number of, you know, possible mechanisms that she's looking at the moment, I'm sure.
Let's go a little broader here. Let's check regionally here. There's also the question of Scottish independence. Nicola Sturgeon, who we heard from a little earlier today, one of the first people to congratulate Liz Truss's appointment, she says that she's keen to get another referendum happening next year. In October, the Supreme Court is due to rule on whether that can actually happen without Westminster's consent. Is there a scenario which won't involve damaging the UK's you know, branding or unity as a whole here?
Yeah, it's another really tricky area. We keep listing the in tray for her is extraordinary. I mean, she talked in her acceptance speech about, you know, it is the Conservative and Unionist Party, but through the campaign she's been quite bombastic about it. She said that she would just ignore Nicola Sturgeon. The current Conservative position is that Scotland shouldn't be allowed another referendum unless it's been given consent by Westminster. If the Supreme Court ruled in such a way that contradicted that, you could see this government introducing legislation that changes the threshold, that says that, you know, it has to be half of all Scottish adults of voting age or something like that, rather than just a particular percentage of those people who did vote. So they could change the goalposts in effect for what would be needed for a referendum to be successful. it could be a huge flashpoint. But at the moment, it is about setting out positions. It's inevitable that Nicola Sturgeon would come out and say that. It's sort of, the fundamental of her platform. But I imagine Liz Truss will be, for the most part, focused on the energy crisis and cost of living in the short term, and will be coming to these kind of issues in future.
Catherine Haddon, we really do appreciate your analysis, and no doubt we'll be speaking to you again maybe a few times over the next couple of years as well. Thank you.